So great looking crew here today, and we just wanted to offer right up front kind of a disclaimer. None of these folks is up here kind of presenting themselves as the epitome of perfection at work, okay? This is a humble group of people. They would gladly and readily admit they mess up at times, just like we all do. But my experience is that at the workplace, what people want to see is not perfection, but real. And you're going to hear some of that today. So thank you guys for participating on our panel today. I think the way I want to start is with Scripture, with the Word of God. And, the Lord lends dignity to our work. You look back at the beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, and we see God, our magnificent Creator, establishing the universe by the word of His mouth and creating our planet and everything that's on it and in it, and creating human beings, placing them in a beautiful garden, and then giving them the creation mandate, basically saying, work the land, subdue it, develop it, cultivate it, and gave dignity to human work. Let me share with you from the New Testament some writings of the Apostle Paul in several of his epistles. Listen to how seriously the Lord takes our work and how we conduct ourselves in the workplace. Slaves or bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering your service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is slave or free. And masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and there is no partiality with him. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. And so what we find in the Scriptures is that God calls His people to live their lives not only in the church and at home, but in the workplace as His ambassadors, as His representatives, and to carry out their work with perseverance and working for the Lord, as He says. And so we're going to have kind of a conversation up here, and we're going to let you eavesdrop in on that. But we're going to talk about this matter of your faith in the workplace, okay? And so the way I want to begin is just to start out by asking you guys this question, because I know that each of you love the Lord and follow Christ, and you would declare that unashamedly. So how does your faith in Christ play out in the workplace? How do you seek to let your Christian life show up in the place where you work? And we're going to start with Andrew on this one.
Yeah. So this is something I've been learning quite a bit about recently. And it came from a statement which has been said, you guys have probably heard it, but said a couple times, and most recently was shared by my brother-in-law. So my brother-in-law is going to become a missionary in South Asia, and they came and spoke to our small group. And so he came, and the way that they opened up, he said, "Hey, my name's Charlie, it's my wife Danny, and like all of you, we are going to become missionaries, and we are missionaries. Just so happens that we're going across the world to South Asia to become missionaries. But you guys are missionaries every day in your day-to-day business. Oftentimes you're missionaries disguised, in my case, as a marketer, as an accountant, or whatever you may be. You're missionaries." And that was kind of game-changing for me. And if you think about it and you actually apply that in your workplace, that changes the game, because what happens is performance is not just based on how your sales performance is coming in. It's not just based upon, did you get that attaboy after a presentation? And those types of things are so up and down, that I just found myself, when I was relying on that, always relying on that type of performance. And it changed my way of thinking to, if I'm at work, my performance is based on how I'm representing God at work. Am I extending His grace and His love to people at work? And that evens things out tremendously, because then it's about that, and it's not about how people are responding to you. So it changes the way that you think about it. And another thing for me, too, being a missionary at work always felt a little bit awkward, right? Because how do you share God at work? It just feels awkward to just interject it into a conversation. And one of the things that I've recently realized is if you want to minister at work, you've got to minister to yourself first. And what I mean by that is your life centered around Christ? Is my life centered around Christ? Am I waking up in the morning with Christ? Am I going to church on the weekends? Am I surrounding myself with that? Because the more that I did with that, that was just who I was. And so every conversation at work, it just came out naturally. It no longer was awkward to share. It became awkward not to share because, what did you do this weekend? Well, I went to church, and this is what I learned. And what did you do last night? Well, it's a small group. And it just became who I was, even to the point we had one time, and these situations would happen where we had an icebreaker at work, and the icebreaker was draw the shield of yourself, and what do you like to do on the weekends? What do you do here? What do you do there? And in the middle is like, what is the core of who you are? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how can I not, if I would lie if I didn't put Christ in there. And so I did, and it felt awkward not to put him in there. So it was just a very different way of thinking for me.
How would you like to be asked that question in the workplace? What is the core of who you are? I mean, that's awesome. Well, Troy, I'm going to go to you next because you and I have had a number of conversations. You own a small business in Gahanna, and I love your perspective on work and how you run your business. So share that with us.
When I was asked to be on the panel, the first thing I thought of was, okay, work, why are we even doing it? What's the point? And I thought, well, because we reflect God's image, because we were made in his image, he works. He created the earth, the stars, just everything. And he did it well. He did it with brilliance. He did it thoroughly. And, also he works so that he can share. Certainly everything he's done, we can see. I mean, every tree is different that he's created. So just all of his work blesses us. And I just thought in our workplace, that's what we need to be. We need to be a blessing to everyone around us and have a servant's heart. Be there for the right reason. When you walk in the back door, say, I'm going to bless everyone around me by doing a great job and really being an encouragement. One scripture that's always helped keep my bearings straight because I tend to be pretty motivated is Ephesians 4. We work so we can share with others in need. So the purpose of work is not stocking up big 401ks and all that, although it's good to save, I think. Certainly Proverbs and Psalms talks about saving and being good stewards, but our reason for work is so we can share with others. We need to be saying, all right, I'm saving up this. I've got a brother or sister or family member in need. Now that I've been, faithful and God has blessed my hands, I can share with others. Also in Matthew, it says, do not store up treasures in heaven or earth. Store them up in heaven. So I thought that was relevant. God is a giver. I guess that's kind of what I want to leave it as. And when we go to work, we need to be going into there, not to say, all right, let's try to bang out the biggest paycheck I can get, but and get the raise I've been looking for. But how can I serve and give to everyone here and store up for others?
Yeah, that's awesome. Reggie, I know you seek to live out your faith at work, and he talked about being there to serve and give to others. Share a little bit about your perspective on this.
Working for the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections at Central Office, there's over 400 employees in addition to 14 to 15 inmates we bring in daily to do various tasks at work. And at work, folks are always, there's so much negativity, anger, hostility in the workplace. But as long as you keep a positive attitude, walk with Christ-like attitudes, folks have a tendency of just kind of attaching themselves to you. A lot of times we try to even seek out other Christians just for support reasons in the church, at the workplace. I just try to walk very positive each and every day. I try to smile, greet folks, and keep an open door policy. When folks need help, I'm there for them. I'll drop everything else if they say, hey, can you have a word of prayer for me? Even if it's at the workplace. We may have to take a break and go outside, but I'm going to pray for them, whether it's an employee, whether it's an inmate. I'm just going to be there for them.
And if you know Reggie, you know that's just who he is. He's not putting on airs or putting on a front, but he loves the Lord, and it shows in his life. Well, Alan, I'm going to come to you on this next one. There are some challenges to being a Christian at work, yes? I mean, really, there are some unique challenges. Alan is bivocational. He works here, and he also manages a dental practice. Now, when you work here, of course, you work around wonderful, sweet, godly, humble, holy people who pray all the time. But now out there, no, it's not actually like that, is it? Talk about just some of the challenges that committed Christians can face in the workplace.
Well, I guess, I'm sometimes an outspoken person, if you know me at all. And there's been times when, just sharing my faith and just trying to live that out at work, I've been approached and said, hey, you got to be careful what you share at work. This is not the time and place. And at first I always kind of wanted to recoil and be like, well, this, we got to make sure we're treating everybody the same and PC, especially as a manager. I got to be careful of some of those things. But as this culture has always kept shifting, this tolerance message, like we got to be tolerant of everybody, and it just got me thinking that applies to Christians too. And so I've been pushing back a little bit on some of those responses, saying, hey, listen, if we're supposed to be tolerant, that means me too. You can't shut down the Christians if I want to share. And obviously I don't want to mow people over, but if we're all supposed to be able to believe whatever we can believe and share whatever we believe, then that would also include me and include you guys. And so I think just changing the way my perspective on that is saying, I'm one of the people too. We're all here, and so we can share faith or whatever it is we worship. And I want to listen to what other people worship and what's most important to their heart, and I want to have that opportunity to do the same. And so I guess with just thinking through how this workplace is changing in these current times, and just making sure I don't retract because I'm a believer. Instead, I say, okay, great. We're making this an open policy. Anybody can share what they feel. Well, here I go.
Anybody else want to chime in on this? What are just some of the challenges we face in the workplace living our lives as Christians? Tim?
I think one of the challenges I faced, especially when I was a new officer, is identity. When you see the uniform, something immediately comes to your mind. But also when you meet somebody new, you get the question, oh, what do you do? And it's, oh, I'm a police officer. And something immediately comes to your mind, either good or bad, depending on your experiences. So for me, it was a struggle and a challenge to not let that be my identity. And I did for a long period of time. And so a lot of work in me was just to develop that that's not who I am. Even at work, that's not who I am. I am in Christ. I am a Christian, and I should be living that out at work and wherever I'm at. So that should be my primary identity, and while I do that at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Betty, you want to amplify on that some?
Yeah, I think it's really important as Christians that you understand that, or non-Christians, you influence those around you. You don't have to be the top CEO. You don't have to be a manager. You're going to influence how you perform, how you respond, how you react. And one of the things that I have to be very careful in is I have to ask myself, would you want to hang around you? I ask that to you. Would you want to hang around you today? Based on how you, and people are watching you, and especially when you throw out there that I did this at church and I have a small group, now they put you in a different category. So your influence is huge. And they just want you to be real. And when I am not the influencer I should be in the daily simple stuff, I have to be real enough to apologize. It's no different than in your family or at church or at the ball game or wherever you are. You're an influencer. And you don't have to tell the entire New Testament. You just need to come in and be who God created you to be and be consistent.
Yeah. In the passage we read from the scriptures, Paul is challenging believers to carry out their work in a certain way. And he says, do your work not by way of eye service as people pleasers, meaning not just when your boss is watching, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. And to me, this speaks of whose approval we're after, whose approval we're chasing after as we do our work. You know, a lot of times we think that God has placed us in our place of work to be a blessing to our coworkers, and certainly that's true, to represent Him well to them, and we think God's going to use us in their lives. But it's also true that God is using our work environment to purify us and to sanctify us as well. And I want us to talk about that a little bit as well. Betty, share about that a little bit, how God is using the workplace to deepen and grow you.
A couple of years ago, I finally read Purpose-Driven Life. It's been around quite a while, and I had surgery and had nothing to do, so I pulled that book out and started reading it, and it changed my world. And I started to realizing that my occupation was just a part of my life, and so every part of your life has a spiritual growth aspect. And one of the things that I have the privilege of doing is I am an owner of the company that I'm in. And it's one thing to be very confident about what you do and who you are, and those are good things. But it's not okay to be arrogant about that. And God had to really talk to me about that and really has refined me with some of that. Arrogance is not good. And people, if God doesn't like it, certainly people don't like it around you either. So I really had to realize that I should be humbled in this position. I have 130 employees. They're families. They're families that need insurance. They're families that need livelihood. I have a responsibility to run a company so that they're okay. So God really just showed me that, and it's humbling to do that. It's an honor. And instead of selling accounting services, I serve. That's the way I have to look at that. The other thing that God has really talked to me about in our small group, we've been doing the Old Testament, and we were laughing at the Israelites for being so mad that manna from heaven would be on the ground waiting every day for them to eat. But, you know, we have the same provision. Your job is you're providing for your family or providing for yourself. It's provision from God. It's my manna from heaven, and I don't want to complain about it. Does anybody in here grumble about their job? Seriously, no one grumbles about their job, okay? We're in church. Now, but I mean, I have to be more grateful. It's my manna from heaven. It doesn't need to be meat. It doesn't need to be more. It doesn't need to be less. I might have to pick it. But I'm really, really blessed that God has showed me those things in the last couple of years.
Yeah. If we're open, there are great sanctifying lessons from the Lord in the workplace in our lives. Anybody else want to share on that? Tim?
I think this was a big part of my sanctification was at work. I guess like any normal man, I'm very good at compartmentalizing. So I could separate kind of my work from my home or from church. And I came to realize that I was a different person at work than I was at home. I acted in a different way. I talked to people in a different way, and not in a good way. And I slowly started to work in me that's really, why is that? Why am I separating that when, if Christ is in me, it should be in me all the time? And I looked around one day, at my coworkers and just kind of thought, do they even know I'm a Christian? Would they know I'm a Christian by the way I'm acting? And that really started to work in me from there, to the point where, I share to them about my mission trips, and they see how I act now at work. I act differently. I'm intentional in that aspect, and now they come to me and ask me questions about faith. They ask me questions about churches, about this church, about my marriage, how I treat my wife, and things like that. And that's a good thing. That's a work that's being continued to be done in me, is that I'm not a different person at work than I am at home or in my neighborhood, but I'm the same person. That's because of who I am.
Yeah. Anybody else want to weigh in on this one? When Paul wrote to a young pastor and he was giving him coaching on how to equip and train his congregation, he said, instruct your people to carry out their work in the workplace in such a way so that the name of God and the teaching may not be reviled. And the teaching refers to the teaching of the good news of the gospel. I want us to think for a little bit about what are some ways that Christians at work can work in such a way and relate with coworkers in such a way that the name of God is not reviled, but rather is upheld. And how do we go about relating the way Jesus would relate at work? And for this one, I'm going to start with Lindsay.
Yeah, as I think about my coworkers and how Jesus might relate to my coworkers, I think it's so important to build a relationship with them, and I don't see my coworkers as a project or people that I'm just trying to get the message to, but I see them as people, and they've become my friends over the years. So I think it's important to do things outside of work, when they plan happy hours, to go and to talk to them, get to know them, know who their family is. I've spent time cooking with people. I've been to their houses. They've been to my houses. I just have one house, just one house. But yeah, just like getting to know them as people. And then that just increases my care for them and my love for them, and it makes me want to share the gospel with them because I care deeply about who they are. And I think another thing would be just to work on the art of listening well. I think that, if I'm just all about what I want to say to them and getting like my message out there, they won't necessarily feel that care, that love. And so I think asking really good questions is something that is an art, and asking the questions and then hearing them and what they say, not just listening and waiting until I can jump back in there, but hearing what they have to say and following up on that and learning about who they are as a person.
Yeah, the power of listening well does so much towards building trust with people, doesn't it? And if you want to go to school on someone to learn how to ask good questions, don't look any further than Jesus Christ. He was always asking people questions, wasn't he? What do you want me to do for you? Who do men say that I am? What do you want? I mean, over and over again, he would ask questions and listen well to people's responses. And as a result, he gained influence in their lives. They trusted him. And so often some Christians think that, they're in their workplace and they're God's gift to this workplace and they're just going to bowl people over with their witness. And really that's usually not the right approach, not the best approach when it comes to gaining true influence with people. So great point about listening, Lindsay. I appreciate that so much. Reggie, I'm going to come to you next because I know, and you've shared with me a number of times, how God has given you opportunities to actually minister to other people in the workplace. I'd love for you to share that with us.
Certainly. At work every day, with me seeing everything that goes on, whether I'm at central office, whether I'm in the prisons, I see a lot of, as I said earlier, negativity, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and then to bring everyday staff together with inmates, that really makes a lot of hostility because you don't want inmates working in your building with you. You don't trust them. There's a lot of trust issues. But every day I go to work, I believe in what Moses told his folks in Exodus 14:13. Stand firm. I even wrote down, stand firm. Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. That's so true. I just believe in just being that Christian that the Lord wants me to be, having that open door policy. If you see someone in need at work, whether it's an inmate, whether it's a staff person, be there for them. Just listen to them. Talk to them. Have compassion. The Lord has humbled me so much in the workplace because to see, from time to time, I will get inmates to say, Mr. Wheeler, can the staff driver take us just for a short ride through the short north on our way back to prison? Just to ride through the short north, for them to see the stores and the people, it's humbling. It's a humbling experience. And for the inmate to come to you and say, I never had anyone pray for me, and you pray for them, that's even more humbling. It's really, I wish I could just have everybody spend one day with me, either at the prison or even at central office. It's a humbling experience. And just to try to share the word with everyone is interesting. For some kind of way, I don't know what happens, but at central office, we don't have a lot of Bibles around. But every week, it seems like these inmates are given a Bible from somewhere. I don't know where they come from, and then I have had inmates say, hey, Mr. Wheeler, I don't have a Bible. I don't know why they come to me, but within a day or so, another Bible will show up. And I just think it's a way of sharing the word with folks. So
It's just a mystery, isn't it?
It's a
How
mystery.
that happens. Yeah, it's amazing.
But it works. It worked. And I just continue to pray for all of them.
Troy, you run a business in Gahanna. It's a bike shop. It's this time of year very busy. I know you've got employees. You got people in the shop all the time. And I know you take this seriously. Share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I had a very motivated young lady come to me, and I had just bought the business about 3.5 years ago, and everyone knew her reputation. She went to work. She just went at it. And she came to me and said, I think religion has a place and it's not in the workplace. And I said to her, well, I can't separate the two. I said, my faith is such that I believe that everyone here was made in God's image, and they're to be honored and respected regardless of their belief system. And for her, she was in a relationship that was not real healthy. And, some people made fun of her and whatnot, but I respected and honored her, and as much as I could. I stood firm on the truth for sure, and told her that I wasn't going to be aggressive with my faith or anything like that, but my faith permeates everything I do, the way I treat people. We're to honor others above ourselves. I was the owner of the store, and, she wasn't. She was just a worker. They had kind of held her down. And, I tried to bless her and be as respectful as possible, and it worked out really well. I ended up promoting her to sales manager very quickly, even with a different belief system, because she really tried to do her work well. But I feel like we need to not allow ourselves to be shut down in the workplaces. We're to speak the truth in love, but the whole trying to silence Christians is very dangerous. We cannot allow that to happen. But we can do it respectfully and honoring, for sure.
It's an old song, has a line that says, "You're the only Jesus some will ever see. You're the only words of life that some will ever read." And it's really true that our Lord calls us to be his hands, his feet, his mouthpiece in the workplace and represent him well. Anybody else want to chime in on this? Andrew?
Yeah, so one of the things that has frustrated me through the years is sometimes you'll hear, well, that person, person of faith, or does this outside of work, and then you see that person at work, and they're just working. They're in work mode and don't really care about you or your family. And recently I realized that that's me. And I think how you get caught up in that is that you start to think about work as, I've got to work, I've got to do it the best that I can and get out of here as quick as I can so I can go home and get on with my day, take care of my family, go to church and do those things. It's not so much you're trying to be a different person there, but you're just trying to get the job done. And you lose sight of that. And so I've really been trying to focus on that, as to say, if I'm a missionary at work, I need to be able to ask the question, to spend some time and go the extra mile, right? If somebody says, how are you doing? You're doing well. Why? And then sit there and listen and hear what they have to say, because that makes a big difference. Because if I talked about being a Christian at work, but then work was just about work and just trying to get through the meetings and get home, then people don't see that, and there's a disconnect. And so that was a big learning that I've been trying to work on.
Yeah. Andrew, I'm going to come back to you on this next one. I want you guys to talk to the person out here who's trying to live out their Christianity at work, and they're taking some heat for it. They're taking some flack. Maybe they're being ridiculed or penalized in some way. What would you say to that believer who's trying, but they're getting some resistance, and maybe even include some things you might want to caution them with? So we'll start with you.
Yeah, so God's plan, God's timing, and I've learned this in a pretty big way recently. I'll give you guys an example. So a couple years ago, I had a friend of mine at work, and this friend, mid-30s, a lot of issues. He had open heart surgery a couple times. He had some serious family issues that he was dealing with, some work insecurity, and he was pretty open, so he'd share it with me. And I would just say, hey, man, I'm praying for you, and give him just a word here or there. And so one day we were in the cafeteria, and I saw him, and I just felt God tugging at me, saying, hey, you don't have any meetings, grab some lunch, just sit down with this guy. And so I saw him, and I asked if he was free, and he was free, and things seemed to be working in the right direction. And then I actually saw one of my coworkers who goes to New Life, and she just happened to come into the cafeteria too. So I said, hey, Jen, let's go talk to this guy. And so it just seemed like everything was kind of working in place, like, all right, here's the moment where I can share more with this guy. So we went out and sat and had lunch with him, and he was talking about some of the things he was going through. And that was probably the most overt that I've ever been with my faith. And I just put it out there and was like, here's what God's doing for me in my life. If I was in your situation, that's the only place that I could turn. And me and my friend just opened up and shared with him. And the reaction was a bad reaction. I mean, it was a straight stiff arm to the chest. It was, stop preaching at me. I don't want your sales pitch. I just want you to love me for who I am and not throw this stuff at me. And I came out of that, and I was like, oh, my gosh, I just really screwed this one up, And it took a lot of boldness to say that, and then it just hit me. And I was like, oh, God, what did I do? And so as time went by, 2 years went by, and I was just like, whenever I'd see him, just, hey, what's going on? And I just would keep it there and ask him how his life was going, but didn't throw anything preachy in there. And about a month ago, I got a text out of the blue. It was Saturday night. I actually want to share the text with you guys. This is from my friend. He says, Andrew, will you be a New Life tomorrow? I don't know what has come over me, but something is sorely missing from my life, and I think I need some church. I also want to note that I admire and respect the man that you are. You've been a role model peer for me for years. And I share that, please don't hear me as sharing that as being prideful. I'm sharing that because that is the glory of God, that he could work in me so broken and just mess the whole thing up, that even throughout that, his timing and his plan, you never know when you're going to say something, no matter how bad it goes, that's going to sit with somebody. And so that has just been super encouraging for me recently.
Just a postscript to that story. So this gentleman came to church here, and I gave him a call that next week, and he said, yeah, God is just rocking me. He said, Pastor Steve, I'm learning that 38 years of being the God of my own universe isn't working. And he said, I saw something in Andrew, and I just had to go to him and say, you got something that I want. What is it? And I thought, wow, isn't that awesome? And I so appreciate all the New Lifers who at school, on your campus, and in your workplace are seeking to live for Christ. And you don't know. You might have a bad experience like Andrew had, and you think, well, I really blew it. Nothing good's going to come of this. And the Lord might be working. Over time, it might take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but just being faithful and being persistent, continuing to love on people and love on people and love on people. You don't know what God is up to and what he might want to do in that person's life. Alan, I want to go to you on this same question. What would you say to that Christian believer in the workplace or on campus who's, taken some pushback and they're thinking about maybe just withdrawing and not going forward?
Yeah, well, I think the important thing for me that I had to learn, and it took a little bit to learn this, was that first and foremost, I had to be confident in my identity and who I was in Christ. I grew up very much a people pleaser, and that's a horrible plan if you're doing that. Go ahead and leave that alone. But it's so hard if I try to do anything in my workplace, or if I try to do I'm just really anything in life, and if I'm so concerned about responding to how people receive me or how well I feel like I look at the end, I really mess things up, and I really do things differently. And so I think the important thing for me, if I want to do more in the workplace and I just want to live my life in a way that honors God, is I understand who he says I am. And that confidence, there's nothing that can replace that level of confidence. that if I say, he did not give me a spirit of fear and timidity, but a spirit of power, love, and self-discipline, that I can step into that because he's inside of me, that changes everything about how I can approach this, how much I want to push or just let him do it and trust him. Otherwise, I try to take too much of it myself because I feel like it's me doing it. And then when someone gives me a bad response, I feel terrible. But instead, I can just say, hey, this is your work, God. I'm just participating because you let me. I don't know why, but you do, and I get to participate with what you're doing and let you do all the work, and I just do what you tell me to do and leave the rest in your hands. And that's really has changed a lot for how I move through my day and just really the weight that I carry after that.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, we're a church that's seeking to be ever more centered in the gospel of Christ, right? And let Jesus take center stage, not only in our worship gatherings, but in our individual lives. Jesus Christ came and lived and died to redeem for himself a people, a special people, a people who would be changed, who would be forgiven, and that would show up in their lives. And so, Lindsay, I'm going to start with you on this final question. It's the gospel question. It's how has embracing the gospel of Christ on ever deeper levels, how is that affecting how you think about your work and how you carry out your job?
Yeah, one story in particular comes to mind. This was my second year of teaching, and this year I had just a really tough class. I had some tough kiddos. I like to call them extra grace kids. I had a lot of extra grace kids. And there was one in particular that had just a lot of needs, a lot of behavioral needs, and I am just a lowly human who is impatient and just need a lot of grace in my job. And so, you know, with the student, I really tried to press in to him and to really build that relationship despite, you know, the behaviors that he was showing. And one day he had a particularly bad morning. And so I invited him to eat lunch with me instead of eating with his friends so that we could talk about it, talk about what was going on, and, you know, and talk about the consequences. And I remember really just saying to him, you know, I love you, I care about you, I am for you. And I'll never forget it. He looked at me, he goes, you don't love me, you don't care about me, you know, whatever. And just kind of went off, and I thought to myself, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. If I didn't love you, if I didn't care about you, I would write you off. I would send you to the principal's office. I would say, you know what, fine, do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. But instead, I was pressing into him, and I was, you know, going the extra mile to get to know him and love him. And in that moment, the Lord spoke to my heart, and he said, Lindsay, this is how you are with me so many times. I struggle to believe the gospel that at my worst, Jesus still loves me and cares about me and wants me and is for me. And so it really spoke to me that a lot of times I'm like this child, that how he was responding to me, that I kind of push God away and say, you don't love me, you don't care about me. And so what a great God I serve. And the more I just meditate on the gospel and read the word and just see it, more things like that happen every day. Because, you know, like these guys have said, my Christian walk is not what I do on Sunday. It's just, it's everything. And so more and more times that happens, and the Lord speaks to me in the middle of my work day. It's pretty great.
Yeah, thank you. Tim, I'm going to come to you next. I know you and I have had conversations about this, and my wife actually heard you speak a month or so ago, and she told me last night, she said, tell Tim to tell this story. So I listen to my wife, so I hope that you will too, because I know the gospel has...
No pressure.
I know that the gospel has impacted you deeply. So share how it's changed your outlook.
It's really affected me in how I treat people at work and how I see them. And when we look at people, and my situation may be a little bit amplified in that I see people at their worst most of the time. Either something really bad has happened to you that day, or you did something bad and I show up. So I get a lot of bad reactions from people on a lot of different sides. But how you see people will affect how you treat them. And if we see people how God intended, we're all created in the image of God. So we all bear his image. So we treat people like an image bearer of God. And if that really sunk into me and how I look at people, so therefore how I react to them. I've been called just about every name in the book. That doesn't define who I am. And I can't control how they act towards me, but I can control my reaction towards them. It's not always the best. I'm still working on that. And I know that this hit me again over the wintertime. I was actually at a hospital, and there's a man there who had went and he had killed his girlfriend and her 2 young daughters. And he was lying in the hospital bed because he endured some injuries out of that. So as a police, we're guarding him to make sure that we, do justice, take him, get his day in court. And we have extra officers there because he's getting death threats from the family who he murdered. So we're protecting him because he murdered 3 people. And it was real easy to sit there and judge him and say that you're a bad person, you're evil, you have no worth in this life. And that hit me as far as, but wait, he still is an image bearer. He has sinned just like I have, and his sin is no worse than mine. And he deserves, like every image bearer, to be treated with honor and love. And I can go about my job and treat him in that way as an image bearer. And that's something that's really affected how I do my job. And it's also affected how my coworkers have, seen me. So I'm able to witness to them in the way I treat other people. And they'll make comments on that, and, it starts conversations.
Wow. How we see people will affect how we treat people. If you didn't write anything else down, you might want to write that down. That line from that song comes to mind. Give me your eyes, that I might see people, Jesus, like you see them. And this is one effect the gospel has on us, right? It elevates the worth and value of every human being to us, because that's how Jesus viewed them. Well, we could talk for hours probably. We'll leave it there. Would you guys just thank these folks for being up here and sharing with us today? Thank you, guys.